What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss even more iOS 17.4 features and changes, Mark Zuckerberg dissing Apple, exciting iPhone 16 and iOS 18 rumors, a crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and also check out the Apple Den newsletter. All right, so let's start by talking about iOS 17.4 Beta 3 and some additional new features and changes found in the software. Now, we are currently on Beta 3, but I would expect to see the final release for 17.4 in just a few weeks, probably about 3 weeks from now. And I'll talk more about that near the end of this segment of the video. But anyways, let's talk about some changes. So the first thing I want to talk about is something I did not mention in my What's New video, and that is if you go to create a new wallpaper on iOS 17.4, and let's just select the Unity Bloom, for example, and if I were to tap on Add and then Set as Wallpaper Pair, you will notice that right here, even in the preview, that the home screen wallpaper is no longer blurred out by default. So if you go to Customize, by default on previous versions of iOS 17, it would be blurred. And now you can see that it is not, and you have to manually go in there and blur now. So that is a good change in my opinion. I really never liked blurring my home screen wallpapers, but that is something new here. And while we're in here, I do want to go down to the Collections section and go to the iPhone 15 Pro wallpaper, and you will notice, and I mentioned this in the What's New video as well, but these wallpapers appear to be darker than they should. So I'm not sure if this is going to be something Apple's going to switch up with these wallpapers or if this is just a bug, but that is something that is new here in the third beta. Okay, so do you guys remember the splash screen in iOS 17.4 for the App Store? Because this says a safe and trusted place to discover amazing apps and games and so on and so forth. Now, I mentioned this because if you remember last week, in last week's episode of Apple Weekly, I mentioned how this whole splash screen is ironic because of, a fake LastPass app that sneaked its way into the App Store. Well, again, this week, we had another pretty strange disguised application. This one wasn't as bad because it probably was not going to hijack your information, but this one was pretty interesting because it was a vision testing application called Kimi, and this mysteriously just rose up to like number 8 on the top free apps list for the entertainment category. And this was actually a piracy application. It was kind of like Popcorn Time, where you can watch and download new movies for free. And it was kind of disguised as this application for you to test your vision. And get this application has been in the App Store for months. It was only just pulled this week because The Verge did a post on it, and that's what got Apple to remove this application. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because iOS 17.4 is going to allow for sideloading. It's going to allow for third-party applications and third-party app stores in the EU, which is why Apple, introduced this whole splash screen to begin with, is to incentivize users to still go through the App Store because that's where it's the most safe and it's the most trusted place to discover all these applications. But yet we have apps like this sneaking their way through, past Apple's review team. And speaking of the EU, Apple just confirmed that they are no longer supporting PWAs or progressive web apps on EU devices. So if you had a web application that you downloaded from Safari, you can no longer do that after iOS 17.4 if you have an EU device, if you're in the EU. Now, Apple did, confirm this. They posted about it on their developer website. And basically the reason they did it is because, iOS 17.4 allows for companies to build browsers that do not use Apple's WebKit engine. So Apple says that this change is why they were forced to remove support for home screen web applications in the EU. Now, something that is not specific to the EU that's changing in iOS 17.4 is the ability for game streaming applications to be allowed into the App Store. However, one of the biggest ones out there, Xbox Cloud Gaming, is not planning to come to the iOS App Store because they basically have no room for monetization. And this was said in an interview with the Microsoft Gaming CEO on The Verge. So for those hoping to get in on, the Xbox Cloud Gaming, unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen even after it's allowed with 17.4, which is, again, unfortunate. Now, something else interesting is that the SharePlay feature has been removed in 17.4 Beta 3 for HomePods. So if you connect your phone to a HomePod via AirPlay and then you want to enable SharePlay with it, that seems to have been removed with 17.4 Beta 3 for the Apple TV and also for iPhone to HomePod. And then speaking of HomePod, we also have new references in the code of tvOS iOS 17.4 Beta 3, and this references a new HomePod with a screen yet again. So we've seen multiple references to a HomePod with a screen, which tells me we are very likely to see this product at a March Apple event. We've been hearing about this for years now, but it looks like it's finally going to be made official in March at an Apple event. And then of course the big change that I talked about last week is that the notification center bug has finally been fixed here in 17.4 Beta 3. It's been a long time, ever since the first beta of iOS 17, that we've had that notification center bug where it was very jittery and just the animation was very all over the place and just ugly. But now that has been officially fixed with 17.4. I can gladly say it. Now, as far as the performance goes on iOS 17.4 Beta 3, it feels good, but it feels about the same as Beta 2. So me personally, I saw the biggest change going from Beta 1 to Beta 2, and now with Beta 3, it feels about the same as Beta 2, which is not a bad thing whatsoever. Performance has been absolutely great here on iOS 17.4. I've really had no complaints, especially given the fact that we have a fix for the notification center bug, the number one thing that drove me crazy UI-wise for a long time, months. So nothing to say bad about the performance. You can see I did just run a recent Geekbench test, and we scored a 2967 on the single core, which if you compare that, yes, that was higher than the initial run on February 13th, but you can see there the multi-core score is slightly lower than our initial run when the software first came out, which is pretty interesting. But you can see if you compare it to the February 6th run, it is higher on both the single core and the multi-core, which is a good sign since we are progressing in the beta stages. And then as far as battery life goes, battery life is fine here on 17.4. I've really not noticed any difference going from 17.3.1 to 17.4, but if you have noticed a difference, just let me know in a comment down below. I'm going to check out my main device here and check out the last 24 hours. So you can see the battery life here is fine. I was charging it most of the, in the morning, or I guess overnight there, and you can see I have not charged it since I woke up this morning, and it's still running steady there at 49%. If we look at the last 10 days, you can see pretty much the same as the previous beta. So I did have the beta 2 on my main device before beta 3. So I have been running every beta on my main device. And you can see not a big difference from beta 2 to beta 3 in terms of battery life, at least with the way that I'm using my phone. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So next up is going to be iOS 17.4 Beta 4, and I expect this to be the final beta before the RC or release candidate version that's going to be released to beta testers. So next week, we should be seeing Beta 4, most likely on the 20th. So I would expect to see Beta 4 on February 20th. And then once again, after that, I would expect to see the RC version on the week of the 26th, most likely right there on Tuesday, the 27th. And then in the first full week of March, we should be seeing iOS 17.4, the final release, most likely on March 4th. However, it could come at any day in that first full week of March. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with iPhone 16 rumors. And these ones are pretty exciting because normally with these iPhone rumors this far out, they're pretty much all based on the design or the cameras or, the processing chip that's inside. And this rumor is interesting because it's not related to the design whatsoever, because this is talking about the neural engine. So this comes from Economic Daily News, and they say that Apple plans to greatly improve the amount of cores in the neural engine for the next generation A18 and M4 chips for future iPhone and Mac models. And they say that this upgraded neural engine is set to greatly improve performance for AI-based tasks, which is what we're expecting to be a major feature for the iPhone 16 specifically, and of course also with iOS 18. But we've heard in the past, and I kind of think that we're going to go this route where the latest iPhone is going to be the only iPhone capable of certain AI tasks, like certain AI capabilities. You're going to have the iPhone 16, maybe even the iPhone 16 Pro to perform certain AI features, but we'll talk about that at a later date because that is not confirmed. However, I do also want to talk about iOS 18 because this week we saw some really interesting iOS 18 news from Mark Gurman just a few days ago. So he reported that the software will be, quote, full of new AI features, or he said it's going to contain a slew of new AI features, and once again reiterated that it will be one of the most significant updates ever. So he mentioned how Apple has explored using AI to automate the creation of Apple Music playlists, to make slideshows and keynotes, and even a fully revamped version of Spotlight Search. He says, quote, "The new version would be able to toggle between specific features within apps and answer complex questions based on data trained from large language models." Early designs of the Spotlight overhaul include using LLMs to answer more complex questions and the ability to tap deeper into apps to launch specific functions. Apple has also continued to hone its own LLMs to enhance Siri and services like AppleCare support. They're looking to improve Siri's ability to answer complex questions accurately, and the customer service teams are trying to speed up chat and phone support. Apple is also heavily invested in integrating AI into its health features. So all of that sounds amazing. And if that is true, and I'm sure there's going to be even more that we're not going to know about until June at the Worldwide Developers Conference, but if all of that is true and what we're expecting is true, I think iOS 18 might very well be the biggest iOS update ever. And speaking of AI, Apple has also been developing a new AI software tool for app developers. So he says, quote, "The company has been working on the tool for the last year as part of the next major version of Xcode. The new system will operate similarly to GitHub Copilot and use artificial intelligence to predict and complete blocks of code. That simplifies the programming process for software development, potentially saving time and money." Apple is also exploring the use of AI to generate code for testing applications, an often tedious process. AI is literally replacing everything, including app developers. I'm just kidding. It's not going to actually replace them. It's going to make their life a lot easier, and you're going to start to see more complex applications probably as, a side effect, as a benefit of having all these AI features and tools built in. So I know you guys are tired of hearing about the Apple Vision Pro at this point, at least most of you are, but we need to talk about Mark Zuckerberg and what he did this past week, because I think it's incredible for a CEO of a $1 trillion company to come out and just put out a video on Instagram like he did, basically dissing the Apple Vision Pro. He didn't really diss it, but he's basically reviewing the Apple Vision Pro and saying how the Meta Quest 3 is a better product, not just a better value, a better product overall than the Apple Vision Pro. So let's break this down a little bit. So in the video, he said, "I expected that Quest would be the better value for most people since it's really good and it's like 7 times less expensive. But after using it, I don't just think that Quest is the better value, I think that Quest is the better product, period." So this was a very interesting and obviously a very biased take, but I don't think that he's fully wrong with what he's saying, because I do think that the Meta Quest 3 is the better value. Like, it's lighter, it's more advanced, it's on its 3rd generation. That's why it's really hard to compare the two products. It's on its 3rd generation, while the Apple Vision Pro is on its 1st generation in the first month of it coming out. Like, it's not just the 1st generation and it's been out for a while. It's literally still on version 1.0 in its 1st month of release for a 1st generation product. So it's really hard to compare everything, especially to something that's more mature in the market. So I don't think that Mark is wrong with what he's saying here. I think he makes a lot of great points actually in this video. And if you looked at my Apple Den newsletter issue from yesterday, you would see all of this. But anyways, yeah. So I just think he makes a lot of good points. He makes a lot of great points about it. And, I just think that the Vision Pro has more advantages than the Meta Quest 3 does. Like, the Meta Quest 3 is great for gaming. It's great for fitness. It's great for wearability for long periods of time because it is lighter and it is comfortable on the face. But the Vision Pro clearly has many advantages over the Quest, like the whole ecosystem side of things. Like, you can go on a full 10-minute, spiel about ecosystem on the Vision Pro, but also the compute is just much more powerful. I mean, nothing on the market is competing with the M2 chip paired with the R1 chip. Nothing is coming close to the performance that Apple gets with those two chips combined inside of the Vision Pro. Also, the resolution is better. The eye tracking, in my opinion, is significantly better than the Vision Pro. Pass-through is even better. Like, pass-through is not great on the Vision Pro, but it's better than the Meta Quest. So there's just a lot of advantages that the Apple Vision Pro has over the Quest, which is why I don't think that it's a better product overall. Like, no price adjustment. Just head to head, the Vision Pro to me is the better product. He also said, so when I look around, it seems like there are a lot of people who just assume that Vision Pro would be higher quality because it's Apple and it costs $3,000 more. But honestly, I'm pretty surprised that Quest is so much better for the vast majority of things that people use these headsets for with that price differential. And this is where I started to really agree with Zuck, because I agree that the Quest is better for the majority of things that people are buying a headset for, which what are the things that people are buying a headset for? It's gaming and it's fitness and it's watching content. That's it. Those are the three things. Before the Apple Vision Pro came along, nobody was realistically using a headset for productivity or to get work done. That was just not a thing. Like, did people do it? Probably. I mean, sure, but it wasn't a realistic way to work before the Apple Vision Pro came out. So yeah, overall, I think the video was great. I mean, I think that he made a lot of great points, a lot of great counterpoints to the Vision Pro and why Quest, does it just as good, if not better, than the Vision Pro. And there's a lot of merit to that. I think it's a genius marketing strategy as well, because I think a lot of people are now going to go out and buy Meta Quest 3 after seeing the CEO of a $1 trillion company talking about it and believing in it so much. So I think it was an awesome video. I don't think that any other CEO that he's competing with could do this. Tim Cook would never be able to pull this off. So, hats off to Mark for that. And yeah, I don't really disagree with everything that he said, only a few points, but overall, I think it was a great video, and it's great to see this type of competition so early in the space. But I don't know, what do you guys think about this? Let me know in a comment down below. And then finally, let's talk about another crazy AirTag story. So this time, a woman in Connecticut got an alert on her iPhone that an unknown AirTag was following her. So this was the first time that she had seen that alert, and that was in February 2023. So she shrugged it off and thought that just a relative maybe left behind a set of AirPods in her vehicle. But then the next month in March, she got another notification about an unknown AirTag, and that's when she decided to search for it. And then she eventually found an AirTag hidden inside of her driver's side rim. So she removed the AirTag from her vehicle and placed it in a plastic bag, took it back to her house, and then contacted the police. Police were able to obtain subscriber information associated with the serial number on the AirTag, and then found the person who purchased the AirTag. And the woman said that, when they gave her the name, that she was not familiar with him and had never had any interactions with him whatsoever, which is quite scary. And then months later, in May, they finally made contact with the stalker, the suspect, who explained that he relocated to another city, and then when police attempted to make arrangements to meet him, he said that he did not drive and would need transportation. So apparently communication attempts failed for many months, and it wasn't until just last week, about a year after the first incident, until police were finally able to establish contact and arrest the man. He was charged with electronic stalking and was released on a $10,000 bond. So I'm glad that this guy was caught, and it was pretty crazy. That's the first time I think I've seen a story where the serial number was used to find the owner of the AirTag. Normally it just says it, but this time they used the serial number to trace it back to find the stalker, which is pretty interesting. You really can't get away with anything if you try to use an AirTag for stalking, so don't get any ideas from these videos. But I'm glad that nobody was injured, nobody was hurt, or anything like that. But my question is, how does it take the police a year to get in contact and arrest this man? I mean, why does he have to drive? I don't know. It was just confusing to me why it took a year for the police to arrest this man, even though they knew exactly who he was. Just because he can't travel, I guess, meant that they can't arrest him. I don't know. It was an interesting situation. But nonetheless, if you get that alert on your phone, always check your car. Don't just assume that somebody left something behind, especially if it's your first time seeing it. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That is the latest in the world of Apple. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe for a lot more Apple news and Apple Weekly videos just like this one. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.